Welcome to the channel, English Epics. As always, when I returned from California, I was exhausted as I turned onto our street around 8 a.m. on Sunday. To my surprise, Sheila's car was parked in front of the house. Sheila was my wife Lori's best friend, but not someone I approved of. Frankly, Sheila was an adulteress. Attractive, yes, but still an adulteress. And I was worried that Lori was spending too much time with her. Sheila had gotten divorced after being caught cheating on her husband, and she spent a lot of time in bars and clubs, constantly making new friends. The kitchen was empty, so I headed straight upstairs, surprised once again to find my wife lying in bed with Sheila sitting beside her. "Hi, baby," Lori said weakly. "How was your trip?" She looked pale and tired. "Are you okay, sweetheart?" I asked, leaning in to kiss her. "Don't get too close," she said, lifting her hand weakly to wave me off. "I've got some awful flu or something. That's why Sheila's here." Sheila smiled at me, subtly, arching her back to accentuate her large breasts. I had always wondered, was that just a habitual movement, or did she do it on purpose? "Hi, Todd," she said. "Lori and I spent part of the evening at Monroe's, but she started feeling really sick, so I brought her here. Then she seemed to develop a fever, and she threw up a couple of times, so I just stayed to make sure she'd be okay until you got back." "Thanks, Sheila. I appreciate that. Would you like some coffee or breakfast or anything else?" "No, thanks. I already had some coffee. Lori just spoke with her doctor on the phone. He can see her in about half an hour, and I'll take her there." I started to object, saying I'd drive her myself, but Lori insisted that Sheila could handle it. "You need to sleep, baby. I know you haven't had any rest in over 24 hours. We agreed that I would sleep in the guest room for a couple of days, so I wouldn't catch whatever Lori had." 10 minutes later, I watched as Sheila helped Lori walk to her car. To my surprise, Sheila drove off toward Markham Avenue, even though my wife's doctor was in the opposite direction. Still, I was too exhausted to think much of it. I collapsed into bed and was fast asleep within minutes. Over the next week, I was a loving, caring husband, but from a distance. According to Lori, Dr. Simon said she likely had some kind of flu, nothing serious, but I should avoid any close contact with her for at least 5 days or so. So I called the clothing store where Lori worked and let them know she would be out for a few days. I cooked meals for Lori and brought them to her on a tray. I cleaned the kitchen, did the laundry, and spent the evenings with my wife, sitting in a chair in the bedroom, watching TV with her while she lay in bed. But we didn't get any closer than 10 feet, and by the weekend, I was even more aroused than usual. Normally, we had sex at least twice a week, and with my trip to California, I had gone 12 days without any of her sweet affection. By Friday, Lori was back on her feet, able to shower, get dressed, and take care of things around the house. That evening, I came home with a bouquet of roses, expecting to be greeted with hugs and kisses from my cheerful wife. I didn't waste time letting her know I was hungry for dessert, but to my dismay, she lowered her eyes and said, "I'm so sorry, honey, but my period just started this afternoon. Can you hang in there a few more days, okay?" I thought about asking for just a little light satisfaction instead, but I decided to be a saint and show her just how patient I could be. At the very least, we could still touch each other, and that weekend, we went to the movies, took a couple of long walks, and cozied up together in bed every night. By the following Tuesday, I thought maybe luck had finally turned in my favor. Finished work at 4:30 so I could head home early and surprise Lori with a nice dinner. Instead, I got a couple of surprises myself, 2 phone messages. First, she said, "Hi, baby. Sorry for the short notice, but we have to do an inventory tonight. A whole truckload of dresses came in with the wrong labeling. I'll probably be here until nearly midnight. Forgive me. Please just make yourself a sandwich and I'll see you when I get home. Also, could you check and see if I left my cell phone on the dresser? I can't find it in my purse. Thanks, love you." Damn, I thought. So much for my hopes of a little love tonight. The second message was from Lori's gynecologist's office, Dr. Mahoney. His receptionist was calling to remind her about an appointment scheduled for the next morning to have her stitches removed. What the hell? I considered calling Lori, but her cell phone was lying right in front of me on the kitchen table. I could have called the store, but figured she was probably swamped with work at the moment. Still, I planned to ask her about it the very moment. She walked through the door. After dinner, leftover season with about 3 beers or so, I watched a bit of baseball and was in bed with the lights off by 10 p.m. Sometime later, I was awakened by the sound of something sliding across the sheets, followed by the delightful sensation of a pair of warm lips. Ever alert, he didn't waste any time coming back to life, bringing the rest of me right along with him. I rolled onto my back in the dark, savoring Lori, who seemed more skilled and eager than ever before. She had nearly brought me to the peak of pleasure when something made me reach over and switch on the bedside lamp, maybe just so I could enjoy the sight of what she was doing, and to my shock, the pair of lips didn't belong to my wife, but to Sheila. The light startled her, but it didn't stop her from climbing on top of me. She was completely naked, and that chest of hers looked even more impressive with nothing covering it. "Sheila, what the hell are you doing?" I shouted, pushing her off. I was incredibly aroused, but not enough to cheat on Lori by letting her best friend ride me. "I've always wanted you, Todd," she purred, using her hand to keep the relationship going. "I know Lori's working late, and she'll never find out. Let this be just a one-time thing. Are you insane?" I jumped out of bed, ignoring the protests of a certain body part that was screaming at me, "Come on, what's the harm? I'm not going to have sex with you, Sheila. Please, Todd, I'll make you feel so good." She chased me across the room and grabbed me tightly, rubbing her chest against mine and locking me between her thighs. God knows I was tempted, but I had never cheated on Lori, and I never would. Fidelity mattered to both of us. We talked about it before we got married, and I knew I could trust her just as much as she trusted me. I was furious and very aroused, which only made the situation worse. I pulled away from Sheila, grabbed her by the wrist, and pushed her back from me. "Now get dressed, you adulterous snake. Put your clothes on and get the hell out of here." Ignoring Sheila's protests, I shoved her into the bathroom, then picked up her clothes and threw them in after her. "If you're not dressed in 3 minutes, I swear I'll walk you to your car completely naked." 5 minutes later, I watched as Sheila drove away. Shaking my head, I trudged back upstairs to bed. I knew she was a lustful creature, but hitting on her best friend's husband? How the hell did she even get into the house? I had just about fallen back into a deep sleep when suddenly the light flipped on, and I heard Lori yelling at me. "You son of a bitch! Damn you! How could you? Wait!" Her voice shifted from rage to utter confusion as I rolled over and jumped out of bed. "Lori, what the hell is going on? Why are you yelling at me?" Her face was bright red. She looked shocked and completely thrown off. Todd. I'm sorry. I thought you, She never finished the sentence. I waited, and the silence grew heavy. Finally, I asked, "Darling, is there something I should know?" She was sitting in the chair, struggling to look me in the eye. "Honey, I waited a bit longer. It's just, some of the girls at work were saying crazy things, and I started thinking maybe you were cheating on me." She looked at me timidly, just to see how I would react. Calmly, I said, "That's the biggest load of crap I've ever heard, Lori. You know I would never do something like that to you. Why tonight? In our bed? I didn't even know until today that you'd be working late tonight. What did you think? That I'd just run off to the nearest bar and pick someone up? Are you out of your mind?" She shook her head, apologizing over and over, but I wasn't buying it. Finally, I said, "Fine. Something's going on here, something you don't want to tell me. So I'll just find somewhere else to stay until you're ready to tell me the truth." While she cried and protested, I threw on some clothes, pulled a suitcase from the closet, and started packing. I didn't have a real plan, just to find a motel for a couple of days. But I'd had enough surprises lately to stop playing the role of the clueless husband. As I headed for the front door, Lori sobbed, "Wait, please, Todd. Okay, I'll do it. I'll tell you." I turned and said, "All of it, Lori, the whole truth, or I'm leaving." Tears filled her eyes as she nodded. We went into the kitchen and sat down at the table. I really thought you'd be in bed with a woman tonight because—" She began crying again. "Because I asked Sheila to come over and seduce you. Why on earth would you do something so ridiculous?" "Lori?" She couldn't look at me. "I can't tell you, Todd. I did something terrible. And if I tell you, you'll leave me. Please, please don't divorce me," she sobbed. "I'm guessing this might have something to do with the stitches Dr. Mahoney is supposed to remove tomorrow?" I asked dryly. Lori stared at me in complete shock, then broke down into such convulsive crying that it took over 10 minutes before she could calm down enough to speak again. It had all been orchestrated by Sheila, which didn't surprise me, who had been encouraging Lori for months to loosen up, have some fun, go out with her on a few evenings while I was away on business trips. So on Saturday, Lori went with her to Monroe's, where they danced, had some drinks, and ran into a couple of Sheila's guy friends. By midnight, the four of them, 2 women and Sheila's friends, Andy and Martin, ended up back at Sheila's place, completely drunk. Sheila whispered to Lori that Martin had the biggest one she had ever seen, and he took my wife into the guest bedroom, where he apparently gave her an energetic demonstration of that claim. "And then she whispered, and stopped. I was already furious and in no mood to dance around the rest of it. "Is he some kind of brainless bastard?" She flinched. "He made me, I got him going again. And then he wanted to, well, he forced me to have rough, unconventional sex with him. But he was too big, and he injured me." I screamed and started bleeding all over the bed, and he just panicked and ran off. Sheila came in, saw what had happened, helped me clean up a little, and drove me home. She stayed the whole night, and the next morning she took me to Dr. Mahoney, who gave me 8 stitches and prescribed antibiotics. He also insisted on testing me for STDs. Thank God, all the results came back negative. I leaned back in my chair, just staring at the foolish cow I had married, watching her curl up in misery. "Is that all?" I asked coldly. She nodded. "It was awful. Todd, it was the worst experience of my life." "I'm so sorry," she said, looking at me pleadingly. "It was only supposed to be a little dancing and flirting. I really don't know how it got that far." I slammed my fist on the table, making her flinch. "What happened is you decided to try another man. You stupid adulteress. Apparently a good big one." I paused for a moment. "And that's why you set up Sheila to sleep with me in our bed, isn't it? So that when you caught me, you'd have a neat little get-out-of-jail-free card for yourself." She nodded, without lifting her eyes. I sat there thinking, watching her cry. I had never in my life been so angry at that stupid adulteress, and almost just as angry at Sheila, her so-called friend. "I'm leaving," I said, standing up. "I'll find somewhere else to stay for a few days." "No, baby, please," she cried, chasing me toward the front door. "I'll never do it again, I swear. I've learned my lesson." "I'm sure you have, Lori. But whether you'll ever get the chance not to do it again, that's up to me." And without giving her a chance to respond, I slammed the door behind me. What a foolish woman. That was all I could say to myself as I sat in a Best Western hotel room, unable to sleep. 8 years of faithful marriage, and she lets her best friend talk her into sleeping with some random guy. For 8 years, she refused to even try anything unconventional in bed with me, saying it was disgusting, but she let that jerk do it. To her. My first stop in the morning would be my lawyer's office to start the divorce process. No point wasting time. But then, why did the thought of it make me feel so empty? After about 3 hours of sleep, my first stop in the morning was actually Sheila's apartment. I pounded on the door until she finally came to open it, her eyes foggy with sleep, and she turned completely pale when she saw me. While she hissed at me to keep my voice down, I pushed my way into her living room, closed the door behind me, and said, "All right, Sheila, we're going to have a little talk." Lori spent the entire day trying to reach me, but I ignored all her calls and emails. So she must have felt a wave of relief when she saw my car in the driveway after work. But when she didn't find me in the kitchen or the living room, she hesitantly climbed the stairs, calling out, "Todd, honey," as she walked into our bedroom. "Hi, Lori," I said coldly without pausing for a moment. Sheila was nearly at her peak, her breathing quickened, and her moans grew louder. "Oh, God," Lori gasped, staring at us in shock. "We'll probably be done here in a few minutes," I said absently. "You can wait downstairs or stay and watch. It's up to you." And with that, I turned my full attention back to Sheila. A couple of minutes later, we both reached climax, me for the first time, and her for the second. I rolled off her unsatisfied exhaustion, and we lay side by side. Lori had disappeared, but a few minutes later she returned, standing silently in the doorway, tears streaming down her cheeks. She said quietly, "I suppose I can't say. How could you? Can I, Todd?" "No, Lori, you can't. You and Sheila planned to get me to sleep with her just to get you off the hook, and I decided it was the perfect solution to our situation. Before long, Sheila's going to give me everything else you've been denying me for years. Turns out, she actually enjoys it." "Sheila," Lori exclaimed, "I thought you were my friend." "I'm sorry," Sheila said, trying unsuccessfully to look apologetic. "But if I hadn't dragged you to Monroe's, Todd wouldn't be on the verge of divorcing you. He made it clear that this was the only way he'd ever consider forgiving you." She shrugged. "And I don't mind telling you, the last half hour was a sign that I'm going to enjoy this for the next few weeks." "Weeks?" Lori staggered and dropped heavily into a chair. "What are you talking about?" "It's simple, my dear faithful wife," I said. "You're moving into the guest room. Your stitches just came out, and I know you'll be off limits to me for at least a couple of weeks. So until then, I'll be enjoying Sheila." I paused, looking her dead in the eye. "And I imagine by the time you're ready to be with me again, I'll have learned a lot about how to make sure you enjoy it too." As I gently pressed on Sheila's head and she slid down to get to work, Lori sat gloomily watching us. "And then?" "Then we'll be together, you and me, Todd." I nodded. "As long as you never pull another idiotic stunt like this one again." She shuddered, whether from the memory of Martin hurting her or from watching Sheila getting me ready for action. I couldn't tell. "Never, Todd. I'll never do anything like that again. I've learned my lesson, believe me." "Good," I said, pulling away from Sheila and positioning her on all fours. I reached for the lube, and we both let out a satisfied breath. Very gradually, following Sheila's guidance, I eased into a steady rhythm. To my surprise, I noticed Lori was still sitting there watching us. She looked utterly miserable. "Baby, I know I deserve this, but I also feel like I don't. I mean, how can you just do this with another woman, right in front of me?" Smiling broadly, I said, "Honestly, Lori, it's like riding a bike. You never forget how. Thank you for being with us. And if you're one of those who watches silently, just leave a like. It helps new stories come to light."